Hola! For this lesson, you have with you Miss Dawn and Miss Ivy. Let's start. These are parallel lines. Parallel lines are said to be straight lines with an equal distance between each other. Parallel lines are said to be coplanar lines, which means they lie on the same plane. Parallel lines never intersect. No matter how far you try to extend them in any given direction, they will never intersect. Now, let's put a line here. What is this? This is a transversal line. A transversal line is a line that intersects two parallel lines at different intersecting points, forming angles. Now, this illustration is a parallel line cut by a transversal. Let us name these angles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Can you determine which type of angles are formed in this illustration? Let's take a look and find out. We have 7 different relationships to remember. Angles 1 and 2 are said to be supplementary, which means that the sum of these angles will equate to 180 degrees or simply a straight line. Likewise, angles 1 and 4, angles 2 and 3, and angles 3 and 4 are also supplementary angles. Now, identify the relationship between angles 1 and 4. Angles 1 and 4 are said to be vertical angles. Vertically opposite angles or apex angles are congruent, which means angles 1 and 4 have the same measurements. Assuming that angle 1 measures 60 degrees, we can conclude that angle 4 also measures 60 degrees. Some vertical angles we can observe in the illustration are angles 2 and 3, angles 5 and 8, and angles 6 and 7. Now, how about the relationship between angles 1 and 5? Angles 1 and 5 are said to be corresponding angles. Corresponding angles are angles that occur on the same side of the transversal line and are congruent in measurement. They are either both obtuse or both acute. Assuming that angle 1 measures 75 degrees, then we can conclude that angle 5 measures 75 degrees as well. Other corresponding angles can be observed are angles 2 and 6, angles 3 and 7, and angles 4 and 8. Now, let's proceed. What could be the relationship between angles 3 and 6? Angles 3 and 6 are said to be an alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angle theorem states, if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then the pairs of alternate interior angles are congruent. Assuming that angle 3 measures 105 degrees, we can conclude that angle 6 also measures 105 degrees. Angles 4 and 5 also have the same relationship between each other. Now, how about angles 2 and 7? Earlier, we talked about alternate interior angles, but now we have alternate exterior angles. Alternate exterior angles theorem states if two parallel lines are cut by transversal, then the pair of alternate exterior angles are congruent. Assuming that angle 2 measures 75 degrees, we can conclude that angle 7 also measures 75 degrees. Angles 1 and 8 also have the same angle relationship. We already discussed 5 relationships, namely supplementary angles, vertical angles, corresponding angles, and alternate interior and exterior angles. But how about this one? Can you identify the relationship between angles 3 and 5? Angles 3 and 5 are said to be consecutive interior angles. These types of angles are interior angles on the same side of the transversal and are supplementary. Assuming that angle 3 measures 105 degrees, then we can conclude that angle 5 measures 75 degrees. Angles 6 and 4 can also be consecutive interior angles. I guess you can now identify the relationship between these angles. Right! They are consecutive exterior angles. These type of angles are exterior angles of the same side of the transversal and are supplementary too. Assuming that angle 1 measures 75 degrees, that we can conclude that angle 7 measures 105 degrees. Now, let's wrap it up. We have 7 different relationships between angles discussed. These are supplementary angles, vertical angles, corresponding angles, alternate interior and alternate exterior angles, consecutive interior and consecutive exterior angles. That's it! You did a very well good job for learning.